Thank you for attending our municipal infrastructure announcement today. My name is Catherine Summers. I'm with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and I will be your moderator for today's question and answer session. So joining us today are the Honourable Andrew Furey, Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, the Honourable Elvis Loveless, Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, the Honourable Gudie Hutchings, Federal Minister of Rural Economic Development, Joanne Thompson, Member of Parliament for St. John's East, and Yvonne Jones, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources and to the Minister of Northern Affairs and Member of Parliament for Labrador. Please stand by. Our news conference will begin shortly.
Okay, if we can ask the MC to begin today's session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to join you today virtually, and I'm joining you from my riding in Labrador, the homelands of the Innu and the Inuit of Labrador. This is a very exciting day and a very exciting announcement for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're so happy to partner with them to assist so many communities in this wonderful province. I'm so pleased today to be joined with Premier Furey, with the Honourable Gudie Hutchings, and the Honourable Elvis Loveless, and my colleague DMP for St. John's South, for St. John's East, Joanne Thompson. So thank you all for being here. And I would like to thank those that could join us today and to acknowledge the tremendous work that's being done by municipalities all across Newfoundland and Labrador. For the past 2 years, we've all faced very unprecedented challenges. Together, we were able to tackle COVID-19 and the pandemic. And as we continue to build back better, we will continue to be there for each other and to support communities across this province and across the country. Strategic investments in recreation, green, rural, and public transit infrastructure are critical to rebuilding communities where residents can thrive, look for new opportunities, and be able to grow their local economy. That's why I'm particularly excited to be with you all today for this announcement and to share how these projects will make a very positive difference for residents within our province. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Premier Andrew Furey. Premier Furey has been instrumental in guiding the agenda through this pandemic for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, with the assistance of tremendous expertise within our healthcare profession. Premier Furey has also looked at new opportunities for economic development and growth within the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. He has been steadfast, committed, and always there as a partner with the federal government to do what is right for the people of our province. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Premier Andrew Furey.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. I'd like to start by first acknowledging the situation in Ukraine. I'm sure that, like our family, many of you have been following Vladimir Putin's horrific attack against the people of Ukraine. We stand, as a province, with Ukrainians all over the world, including here in our province, and join the federal government and our NATO allies in condemning Russia's actions. This unprovoked and completely unacceptable invasion by Russian forces is an attack on democracy. But democracy has been tested before. And as generations before stood in the face of such tests, we need to stand with courage and conviction in the pursuit of its defense, in the pursuit of freedom for all. Putin's actions will forever be a dark stain on the world stage. Ukrainians have shown incredible resilience and defiance in the face of grave danger. That, my friends, is the power of freedom, the power of the human spirit, and it is that power that will allow hope, freedom, and democracy to prevail over tyranny, fear, and an authoritative regime. Now, let's turn to today's announcement. I can confidently say that with my friends who are joining us here this afternoon, that we share a common goal to make our province a better place to call home, with a bright future for our children and newcomers alike. We are already seeing the results of some incredible work, or should I say, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are already seeing the results of your work here in our province. Minister Loveless and my caucus have been working really hard to support all of Newfoundland and Labrador during these troubling times. And rest assured, each and every one of us is focused on doing what is best for Newfoundland and Labrador, and in turn, what is best for the country. You have seen that with our most recent historic rate mitigation deal, through which your provincial government successfully guaranteed power rates will not double when Muskrat Falls comes online. We secured a deal to help keep power affordable for families in Newfoundland and Labrador despite the crippling burden of the hydro mega project. Just last week, we announced with our federal partners that we will provide up to $136 million to connect all remaining rural households in Newfoundland and Labrador to reliable, high-speed internet. An investment in broadband is an investment in communities, and it improves access to a range of services, from healthcare to educational opportunities, and of course, economic development. This is the kind of progress that can be accomplished when we all work together. So today, I'm happy to be here again with our federal partners as we announce more than $23.8 million to support 23 recreation, green, rural, and public transit infrastructure projects across our beautiful province. When you look at the list of projects we are funding here today, you see a long list of important pieces that help provide critical services to people in our communities. For example, we are funding sewer upgrades in communities like Badger, Bay de Verde, and Harbour Grace, and replacing water lines in Rocky Harbour, part of my beautiful district of Humber-Gross-Mourne. And that's just to highlight a few. All of these projects are key to helping communities grow, thrive, and continue to reach their full potential while providing modern services. My friends, we can't overstate the importance of active living. People want and need access to recreational spaces and options for recreational activities for their families. We know that Newfoundland and Labrador spends the most per capita on healthcare, yet we have the worst outcomes. We all know we need to become a healthier province, and our government is so proud to continue to work with municipalities towards that goal. Community leaders know what kinds of things people in their areas are looking for to make healthy living easier. Things like expanded trail systems and recreational facilities. To that end, more than $2.7 million is included in this funding today to repair and upgrade the Centennial Pool in Bay Verde, establish an active recreation route along Corner Brook's waterfront as part of the Great Trail Enhancement, and upgrade the Amarook Golf Club in Happy Valley Goose Bay to help make it a year-round, healthy, and active living facility. These projects stress the importance of active lifestyles and the benefits that healthy living has, not just on our physical health, but indeed on our mental health as well. Our government also understands that when we improve accessibility and inclusion, everyone in Newfoundland and Labrador benefits. Our new Accessibility Act was proclaimed in December with strong leadership from Minister Abbott, and it allows our government to establish standards requiring individuals, private sector, and public bodies to take action that improve accessibility for all of Newfoundland and Labrador. The Accessible Bus Shelter project we are announcing for St. John's is a great example of what public entities can consider for their own accessibility plans. Accessible bus shelters will make it easier for people using mobility devices to use bus shelters and public transit. Last but not least, I'm glad to see that the Shoal Harbour Causeway Bridge is being replaced. I know how important this bridge is to the people of Clarenville. And replacing this bridge will provide residents and tourists in the region with another safe link in and out of their community. So to the mayors joining us here today online, thank you for your insight in how to best improve your communities. I know, like us, you are all looking ahead to the future to see what we can accomplish. And we value your insight, leadership, and collaboration. Last year, our government invested over $147 million for communities to improve infrastructure and enhance services. Of course, planning for Budget 2022 is underway, and I know officials in the Department of Finance have met with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, earlier this month, and we look forward to continuing significant investments in municipalities in 2022-2023. These are funding programs through Infrastructure Canada, and we appreciate our federal colleagues' support in making sure that these concerns are heard, these applications are reviewed, and these projects are ultimately approved. Soon, residents here will see some of their own infrastructure being repaired and improved. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to making more infrastructure announcements in the near future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Premier Furey, and thank you for that announcement and partnership. I'm sure the municipalities that are on the line and those at home will agree that anytime we can infuse nearly $28 million in infrastructure spending in communities across the province is definitely a good day for our communities. I'd now like to call up on my colleague, the Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development, Gudie Hutchings. Gudie has been very engaged in all of these municipal infrastructure programs and in discussions with Minister Loveless to ensure we get to where we are today. We have a great champion in Minister Hutchings when it comes to rural and economic communities in Ottawa, and I'm very pleased to ask her to come forward now, please.
Thank you, Yvonne. Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. Pleasure to be here virtually with you, Premier and Minister Loveless and other provincial colleagues, and of course, my dear friend Joanne. I want to take a minute, as the Premier did, to recognize what's going on across the globe. And I want to make everyone on this call realize that Canada condemns, in the strongest possible terms, Russia's egregious attack on the Ukraine. These additional unprovoked actions are another clear and further violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and their independence. They're also in violation of Russia's obligations under international law and in the Charter of the United Nations. I want to let you know that Canada has already taken a series of measures in close coordination with our allies and our international partners to respond to Russia's egregious and illegal invasion of the Ukraine. And just 2 hours ago, we announced that Canadian banks can no longer transact with Russian banks. And that just ceases the ability for the Russian banks to finance this war. Russia's attack on Ukraine is also an attack on democracy, on international law, on human rights, and frankly, on freedom. It threatens peace and order in Europe and all around the world. These unwarranted actions will not go unpunished, and we will continue to stand with Ukraine, its people, and the Ukrainian-Canadian community right here in Canada. So now, while we're on to better news here at home today, and the Premier's so right, partnerships are so key. We've had some wonderful announcements the last few weeks, Premier, of course, on rate mitigation, which is going to impact every single community, every single individual, every single fish plant, small business. That was phenomenal news. And last week, the file close to my heart, of course, was connectivity. And that's frankly, to put in layman's terms, connecting those last 60,000 houses in Newfoundland and Labrador so you can do your homework. You can move your business online. You can avail of healthcare. And frankly, you can keep in touch. So throughout this pandemic, our Liberal government has made it clear, we're going to be there for you. And as we build back better, we're going to keep working to support you. And through our government's historic Investing in Canada plan, our focus remains on building a brighter future, a more prosperous, a more resilient, and a more sustainable Canada. This is a plan that is going to create thousands of good paying jobs all across the country and right home in Newfoundland and Labrador. So today, on behalf of my colleague and friend, the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities, I'm excited to share that our Liberal government is investing jointly with the province and municipalities, as the Premier said, a total of $23 million, of which our investment is more than $9 million. This is to support 23 projects across Newfoundland and Labrador. And as the Premier said, the funding is for green infrastructure investments, for public transit, for rural infrastructure, all things to make your communities better. In Cornbrook, for example, it's going to benefit from the new active transportation infrastructure along the town's waterfront. Mayor Parsons, you'll be glad to hear that. And I was in Rocky Harbour last week, and I heard loud and clear from the mayor and council there. And they'll be delighted that they're going to see the new water line transmission, which means a new dependable water source. And I was in Stephenville last week with you, Mayor Rose, and we announced funding to over $1.5 million for safety-related projects for the 3 airports in central and western Newfoundland. And now we're going to have funding to improve the safety of the Minnesota Drive overpass, which is long overdue. In Steadybrook, near where I live, and ski capital for the province premier, we're going to be installing mechanical and electrical systems to provide safe and reliable sanitary sewer pumps. We're installing a water main to provide residents with potable water in Trout River. And that's going to provide all our communities with immediate and positive impacts. Like as the Premier mentioned in Bayvert, to repair the Centennial Pool and the buildings with that, that's going to restore a shared space that the community and the outlying communities can enjoy. These are just a few upgrades throughout the province that find themselves in my riding's backyard, and they will improve our local economy and our local environment. Now, I'm not going to go into too many details, as I know my colleagues all on this call and those not on the call will have more to say about the details in their regions later on. So friends, when we invest in infrastructure, we're creating stronger neighborhoods. We're improving the quality of life for every Newfoundlander and Labradorian. Our mental health, our physical health is all related to our health of our communities. So thank you to each and every one of you on the call today for what you do for your municipality and your community. So congratulations and thanks to everyone on the call who made this collaboration possible. I'd now like to pass the floor back to Yvonne. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Hutchings, and I certainly appreciate those remarks. I think as both yourself and the Premier has acknowledged, the $23.7 million today for 23 projects is certainly going to make tremendous difference in Newfoundland and Labrador. I just wanted to highlight as well that under the Investing Canada plan, the federal government is investing more than $180 billion over the next 12 years in public transit projects, green infrastructure, social infrastructure, trade and transportation routes, and Canada's rural and northern communities. To date, the Government of Canada has invested more than $920 million in 1,200 infrastructure projects across Newfoundland and Labrador under the Investing in Canada plan. That in itself has been a tremendous investment that is making valuable changes for many communities in our province. I'd now like to invite my good friend and colleague, the Minister Elvis Loveless, who's the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure for the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador, to bring comments. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you, Ian P. Jones. Thank you, Premier. Always a pleasure. And Minister Hutchings. And I'd also like to acknowledge one of my colleagues that's on the line today, as well as Minister of Municipal and Provincial Affairs, Minister Howell, as we've had many conversations around infrastructure. And I know it's important for her department, and not just her department, but as MHA as well in around infrastructure. So I'd like to acknowledge her. And there are other colleagues as well joining us. It's great to have many join us today as we announce funding for a number of projects across the province. and many large infrastructure projects, I might add, that are already underway in our province right now. It is a priority of our government to continue to invest in our province infrastructure, and today's announcement is another layer of that commitment. As the Premier has alluded to, and Minister Hutchings as well, today we see $23.8 million in funding to support 23 recreation, green, rural, and public infrastructure projects across Newfoundland and Labrador. And we see those projects with upgrades to recreation facilities, as the Premier has mentioned, in terms of the importance of that, water and sewage infrastructure, and road work. It was last April that I became Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and since that time, I've already participated in numerous announcements with my good friend Gudie and other federal colleagues to share costs for infrastructure. Those projects have totaled more than $170 million in the last 10 months. That's a long list of projects that include trails, lift stations, clean water, sewer pipes, transportation for persons with disabilities, and many more. Funding for recreation, public buildings, and for school upgrades. The list goes on. These are all projects that are very important to these municipalities, and they are all projects where different levels of government work together for the benefit of the municipalities, the people who live there, and the people who visit. It is great to see projects being completed in so many different districts and municipalities, and very positive to see MHAs, mayors, and councillors on this call today as we highlight the work being done. These municipal projects that we are announcing today also help create employment in these communities. Creating better services while employing people right here in our province is something we are very proud of and being able to do. As been said before, there are 23 projects, and each one of them holds a great deal of importance within their own communities. With all three levels working together, we can accomplish so much. So, to the mayors, and maybe other councillors may be joining us here online today, thank you for your leadership in your communities to advance this important work. And to Gudie, thank you for your work on the west coast of this great province and in Ottawa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Loveless, and I appreciate you recognizing Minister Howell. I didn't realize she was on the line, but welcome, Minister Howell, and thank you for your good work with municipalities in the province as well. I have to say the relationship between the federal and provincial government is certainly delivered well for the people of this province, and we will keep that going with the tremendous representation that we've had on both sides in pushing the agenda for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. I'd now like to ask my colleague, Joanne Thompson, who's the member for St. John's East, to say a few words. Welcome, Joanne. Happy you could join us today.
Thank you, and I am so pleased to be here, and I'm particularly to announce supports for public transit. And I do want to note that Mayor Breen is on the line, and I know in past projects that we were engaged with in terms of transport in the city and accessible transit shelters. This is something near and dear to your heart as well, Mayor Breen. 10 new accessible bus shelters, over $80,000 designated to this important project at bus stops throughout the city, and it really is an expansion of an existing program. We know that for people and citizens of St. John's to begin to use a bus system, that we have to be able to provide supports that understands the weather in St. John's is not always conducive to standing outside. And then also the second half of this is to have a shelter that understands accessibility is inclusivity, it's respect. And so across the routes, people can expect that regardless of mobility, there's a safe space out of weather that will provide that shelter, so that the bus systems become something much more than a system with limited usage, but truly becomes a way of life. It is how we're going to move to a greener transportation system. And I believe it's how we're going to shift our focus in the city away from buses being more for schools and other specific groups to a system that we all need to partake in, and that truly this is our public transit, and it is the way that we're going to help reach our goals on a green transition. So I'm so pleased to be part of this. Mayor Breen, thank you for being here today. And, you know, I believe that we will reach a point where every bus stop has accessible shelter. So thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this exciting announcement. And again, isn't this an example of such high level partnerships on 3 levels within 3 levels of government? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanne, and that's great news for the city of St. John's and for all those transit riders who depend on that service. Wonderful news indeed. You know, the Infrastructure Canada program has been there to address very difficult challenges for Canadians, and we've seen that right here in our own province. Whether it's ranging from rapid growth in cities to aging infrastructure or the lack of it in rural and northern communities, whether it's climate change and environmental threats to water and land, or transit and transportation needs. The program is really designed to address those multitude of problems that we often experience. I'm really pleased today that under this program, we will see investments into Inuit community governments in Northern Labrador, in the community of Hopedale, and also in the community of Nain. There will be investments towards the community's clean water and sewer services in those communities, which are key for the residents that live there. And of course, our goal as a government is to ensure whenever and wherever possible in a timely manner that all communities across Canada will have adequate water and sewer services and a capacity to manage it on their own. I'd also like to conclude the conference and to turn it over for questions. Before I do that, I also want to reiterate what Premier Furey and Minister Hutchings has said in extending our generosity, our support, and our love to the people of Ukraine. Russia's invasion of the Ukraine is an attack on innocent people in a democratic country. It is violent and it is dictatorial. You know, as all of us as Canadians and here in Newfoundland and Labrador offer prayers to the people of Ukraine, we ask ourselves what we can do, how we can be of assistance. And we can all do a little through the humanitarian support program. Each of us have saw on the news so many men, women, and children fleeing their homes, who are traveling with bare minimum supplies, who are in situations where they are required emergency services and often cut off from mainstream supplies that they've been used to. We can all help by supporting the humanitarian aid and supports that are there, and that in itself will make a small difference. So as I conclude today, I want to thank the ministers for their comments and for their commitment to municipalities and services in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I now turn it back to the media for questions, and those questions will be addressed by Premier Furey and Minister Hutchings.
Thank you. For the benefit of our speakers, we have 4 media joining by phone. There will be 2 rounds in the question and answer session, which will give each reporter the opportunity to ask 1 question, 1 follow-up, followed by 1 final question. Our first questions are from Rachel Haynes with CTV. I'm not 100% sure if Rachel is on the line there. So we will go right to Mike Connors with NTV. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello, I actually just wanted to start off on the Ukraine issue. This is for Premier or the Minister, if you're able to answer. Chris Tibbs is calling on the province to accept refugees from Ukraine as it's done with Afghanistan. I know this is early days and there's probably a lot of steps to go, but is that something the province would be interested in doing?
We've already reached out, Michael, far before Mr. Tibbs recognized it as a good idea, because it is a good idea. It's a good idea for us to welcome displaced Ukrainians, and certainly Minister Byrne has reached out to his federal counterpart, and I've expressed the same to officials in the federal government, my counterpart in IGA, of course, our own local ministers, and the Minister of National Defense as well.
And Mike, just to add to what the Premier said, Minister Fraser here is active on this and has done a phenomenal job, frankly, in this portfolio. And he's very passionate about what we can do, working with all our provinces and territories to welcome Ukraine people here.
Thank you. And actually, Minister Byrne on Twitter also floated this idea of not allowing Russian boats under NAFO to dock in Canadian ports. Again, is this something that you would agree with, or that both of you think should be done?
Look, I think given the situation in the Ukraine right now, I think it's incumbent upon the entire country, including the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, to look at the harshest sanctions possible against Russia. And if that includes ships, Russian ships and vessels in our own ports, then it would certainly be something that I would support.
And Mike, to add to what the Premier said, you know, the measures that we've taken are just the beginning. We're going to continue to work with our allies and do what's needed. And frankly, thanks to the province, you know, we've seen how just everyday Newfoundlanders and Labradorians can help. You know, they've removed the Russian vodkas off the shelf, so we can all do our little bit, as Yvonne said.
Thank you. Next, we have Rafsan Farouk Jugal with CBC Labrador.
The first question is for Premier Furey. The Mike Addings Recreational Complex in Labrador West has closed down due to the town of Wabush and Labrador City not being able to come to an agreement on a funding arrangement. Now, does the province have a role here in securing recreational services for the municipalities of Labrador West?
We are always interested in partnering with all levels of government to ensure recreational facilities so that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians can live the active, healthy lifestyle that not only they deserve, frankly. So if there are proposals initiated by those two towns, we'd certainly be willing to have a look and how we can partake.
Now, my second question is for Minister Loveless. Now, the provincial government originally announced a $200,000 for a pre-feasibility study to build a road to connect coastal communities of Northern Labrador potentially to the rest of Labrador. This was originally announced in Budget 2020 and then re-announced in Budget 21. Now, as we're heading to Budget 2022, what is the progress report on this potential road?
Great question, and thank you for it. We currently have internally the terms of reference that are drafted and being further discussed, and within the next couple of weeks as well, we will be sharing that with the stakeholders in Labrador as well. So I look forward to those discussions and an ongoing work on this file.
Thank you. Our next questions are from Renelle Legros with All Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you very much. I think my questions have actually been answered at this time.
Perfect, thank you. So we'll go back through. Mike Connors, do you have another question?
Sure. I just wanted if someone could maybe elaborate on these accessible bus shelters in St. John's. I guess what do we know yet? What parts of the city they would be in? I guess how are they different from the existing bus shelters?
Probably best for you.
Yeah, no, sorry, Michael, I don't have those finite details with me right now, but we can work on getting those details for you.
Thank you. And Rafsan, did you have a final question?
Yes, I had a question for the Federal Minister Hutchings. Now, housing, healthcare, and transportation infrastructure is a concern for many in rural Labrador across different municipalities. Now, moving forward from the announcements today, can the federal government, financially speaking, can they play an even bigger role in alleviating some of these concerns?
Rasan, thank you. That's a wonderful question. And just a couple of days ago, I participated with Minister Hussain, our federal minister for housing, on a roundtable from municipalities and Indigenous groups from all across the country, all about what we need to do in housing. We've made significant investments in housing, rapid housing stream, working with CMHC and others. And I can tell you that this is, as you know, I'm sure, in my mandate letter. And housing is a focus for me as I've traveled around the country and done many roundtables at home in Newfoundland. And like I said, from coast to coast to coast, the number one issue I hear is connectivity, and we have a plan for that and we're working forward. The number two issue is housing and workforce immigration. So they are front and center for me as well, Razam. So stay tuned. We're working on rolling out some further details in our plan in months ahead. But I always encourage all the municipalities to reach out if they have projects or ideas in their area. It's by us all working together and thinking outside the box, we will address this housing issue all across the country.
Thank you. And Ronelle, were you still good? Just wanted to make sure.
I am. Thank you very much for circling back.
Perfect. All right, everybody, that concludes our event today. If we could just ask our speakers to stay on the call, we're going to get a quick photo.
Do we say cheese or what's happening here?